Picture the scene. Jesus, knowing that his journey to Jerusalem will end with his death on the cross, is spending some private, intimate moments with his disciples. The Passover feast is approaching, and as John's Gospel tells us, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Another Bible version says this: from beginning to end, Jesus' days were marked by his love for his people. And another puts it like this: having loved his own who were in the world, he, Jesus, now showed them the full extent of his love. Jesus knows what's coming. He knows that he'll soon be betrayed by Judas. He knows that he'll soon be abandoned by the other disciples. He knows the full extent of their weakness, so he shows them the full extent of his love. And this is what happens next. We read this in John chapter 13, verse 1. He laid aside his outer garments and, taking a towel, tied it around his waist. He then poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Here we have Jesus, God's Son, performing a task that was usually reserved for non-Jewish slaves, washing the dust and grime-covered feet of his disciples, a task that was below most, let alone the Son of God. This was a powerful and enduring symbol of love in action. It's a symbol that points to sacrifice. It points to the sacrificial love that Jesus would show on the cross when by his death he would cleanse people of their wrongdoing. There's an old hymn you might be aware of that says this: "Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb?" Now the language might seem a bit outdated. It might need a bit of translating for the 21st century, but essentially the question is this: have you believed that Jesus died on the cross for you? Have you given to him the mess and the confusion and the guilt of your own life? Have you asked him to make you clean and give you a new start? Because the promise of Easter is that if you ask him, he will wash you clean. But there's also a very practical and equally profound application to this symbolic act. It wasn't only about sacrifice, it was also about servanthood. Listen to these words, starting to read now from chapter 13, verse 12. "Do you understand what I've done for you?" Jesus asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." Then he goes on to say this: "Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." Now there are some churches around the world, I'm sure, that regularly observe a ceremony of foot washing. But I think that what Jesus is saying here applies to our ordinary, everyday lives. It's not confined to one-off ceremonies, it's an attitude for everyday living. This is what we read in Philippians chapter 2 in the New Testament. "Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And, being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. One person has written this: imagine what would happen if people in our world took up serving towels and willingly, even joyfully, served other people in their everyday lives. Such attitudes and actions would change the world. You know what? Now, more than ever, the world needs to see a church that acts like Jesus. A church that is defined by humble acts of service. At the end of this video, I want to invite you to follow the link below and to listen to these words. You may know them, they may be brand new to you. So let us learn how to serve and in our lives enthrone him, each other's needs to prefer, for it is Christ we're serving. This is our God, the servant King. He calls us now to follow him, to bring our lives as a daily offering of worship to the servant King. This Easter, let's see to it that the church is defined by its self-giving, others-focused, convention-defying, Jesus-imitating acts of service. Let's be servants of our friends, our neighbours, our family members through our small, thoughtful, caring acts of kindness, even if they are from a distance right now. And as we become a blessing to others, let's remember the words of Jesus. And as we take up the towel, may we too be blessed this Easter.